To those who aren't as familiar with your project so far, how would you describe the Anakim sound?
The Anakim sound was described by this catchphrase called intergalactic underground sounds.
Mhm.
But I feel as though, you know, we've been in this project now for 4 or 5 years, and the evolution of my sound has graduated from that. Because when I first started, I wanted a very intergalactic, interstellar, hard hitting type of music.
Yeah.
And I think I've sort of evolved into a more subtle, emotional, melodic house type of sound. My first real introduction to music was sort of that Seattle grunge rock sound that Nirvana blew up. And then also the sort of teen hip hop style that Crisscross was really popular for at the time. The bands that I truly loved, or the number one band that I truly loved, was MXPX. And then outside of that, it was like Pennywise and NoFX, and basically all the bands that you would see on a band's Warped Tour lineup. That was what I was really into. And then transitioning it, from like seventh grade to eighth grade, I was like, oh, let me give this hip hop thing another go around. And that was when Biggie was really popular. So Biggie is who got me back into rap. And then from there, I was just straight up listening to rap with like sprinkled pockets of punk rock, but I really gravitated towards that late 90s, early 2000s hip hop sound that you heard through, productions from like Bad Boy and also from like Death Row Records. I had a friend introduce me to rave culture, and that's when I realized, oh, this FL Studio program is what these producers use to make this style of music. I wonder if I would be good at this.
But
hmm
you pursued other things like within those 10 years, right? I know that you have some other like artistic modalities that you've delved into.
In that time, I got scouted when I moved back to San Diego. In that time, I got scouted by a modeling agency, and they started sending me on castings to Los Angeles. So, at the age of 18, I started coming up to LA for modeling castings and whatnot. And then I started booking some big campaigns, and a bigger modeling agency poached me from the smaller agency that I was rep by in San Diego.
Mhm.
So from there, I got into UCLA and really established myself in Los Angeles. And, from modeling, that led into doing campaigns for like Gap and Levi's, and, national campaigns for Target and Converse and stuff like that, to commercials, where the first commercial that I ever booked was a Wendy's national commercial. And that sort of opened my eyes to acting and the whole acting world. During that time, on the weekends, I would be going to raves and I would be going to club shows.
Yeah.
So music was always, always right there. Making music, for me, it's, well, at least in the beginning, it's sort of a faceless thing. You create this track, you create this sound, this song, and you put it out there, and people aren't judging you based on, your acting ability, what you look like on camera, none of that. If the track resonates with an individual, that's what matters. And I really love that fact, you know? So from there, I it was difficult. It was a difficult decision to decide to go into music fully, but once I did, I knew I made the right decision, and I've never looked back since. I had to go on that journey to realize essentially what what really made me happy, and that was music. And I knew that it was music all along. I just didn't believe that I had what it took to be an artist in the music industry. To me, that was a little bit more foreign than seeing actors on television. But the real magic was in making a piece of music that could touch someone the way all of those songs I heard on dance floors across America touched me.
Yeah, but you have to tell me. I mean, I feel like your whole come up story is just it's pretty ridiculous in my opinion, in a great way. Uh, could you start at the Insomniac Discovery Project, like the whole submission process and the acceptance for you, how that played out?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Hmm.
So I saw Insomniac, every single rave that they, or every single festival that they throw, they usually have a submission for this thing called the Discovery Project, where they're looking for um, one person who they think stands, or one producer they think stands above and beyond every other producer that submits to this contest. And the contest is you submit an original track that's unsigned, and you also submit a 30-minute mix. So I submitted a track that I titled Uncanny Valley. I honestly didn't even think it was that good. And then I submitted a 30-minute mix of just originals. And I was like, well, you know, I kind of submitted a track that wasn't that good. All my other tracks that I thought were really good are held up with other labels right now. So I'm definitely not going to win this. And I completely forgot about it. And then I was driving with my girlfriend. I think we were going to see her parents. Um, and I got a phone call, and it was Joe Weissman. So if Joe ever sees this, what up, Joe? But he works at Insomniac.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Hey, this is Riccardo. Hey, this is Joe from Insomniac." And I was like, "Hi." He's like, "Hey, is this a good time? We want to let you know that you won the Discovery Project for Beyond Wonderland." And I was like, "I what?" And so my girlfriend starts freaking out. I sent my friend this EP, and it was the first EP that I finished outside of Icon. And I was like, "Hey, I don't really know what to do with this. I know you work for Hard. Is there any way you could give me some advice?" And my friend was like, "It's so crazy that you send me this now, because I've been thinking about getting into artist management, but I just didn't really know who I should manage. Do you want to give it a shot?" And I'm like, "Absolutely." So he passed my EP to Lane 8, and this was prior to Lane 8 starting his own record label called This Never Happened, which is very successful now.
Hmm.
And he held on to those tracks for like 6 or 7 months because he wasn't sure what direction he wanted to go with the label. But he really liked them. So he started playing my music out first. And from there, Lane 8 decided that he didn't want to sign the tracks, but he had a national tour coming up, and he had 3 dates in Southern California, and he invited me to be the opener for all 3 dates. So the very, very first show the second show I ever played, the very second show I ever played was at the Fonda Theater here in Los Angeles. And then after that, I went and played the Observatory in Orange County, another big venue. And then after that was Bang Bang in San Diego. So I had never really DJ'd outside of my bedroom
Yeah.
until those shows. And like suddenly I was just doing it. And that's after that, I was like, all right, uh, I definitely can do this. And all the years that I spent DJing in my bedroom by myself, looking at the wall, envisioning a crowd, that visualization absolutely held me to, control a crowd and be, not nervous and stuff like that.
To go back to the sound residency, didn't you meet a certain someone at Sound?
Yes,
I'd love to
so
know
my
more
very
about that.
my very first show ever was in direct support for Jeremy Olander, and that was in late 2016. Jeremy was an artist and producer that I really, really looked up to at the time. I still do. I think he makes incredible music. So my manager at the time hit up Mark Andresic, who is the talent booker over at Sound, and he asked Mark if we could get guest lists to see Jeremy perform. And Mark countered with, "How about we have your boy open up for him?" And I had never performed anywhere before outside of my bedroom. So I was freaking out. And the whole 2 hour opening set that I have went as perfect as possible. And I remember just being so high on life, just so jazzed about everything. And I walked into the crowd, and this guy stopped me, and he was like, "Hey, what's up? My name is Andrew Condi. I have this crew called Understated, and we're going to be starting a record label. I loved what you did up there. Email me if you have any tracks." And I actually had this EP called Veins,
Mhm.
which I was having a difficult time signing because it was in between techno and progressive. It was pretty much, like progressive techno, melodic techno, not the
Mhm.
melodic techno that you know today, but it was a sort of an in-betweener. So a lot of labels were like, man, these tracks are really good, but it's not techno enough. Or this EP is fire, but it's not progressive enough. So I didn't know what to do with it. So I sent it to Andrew, and that's just how I fell in with Understated. They released that EP, and that was sort of the catalyst to everything that I'm doing now.
I guess more so in comparison to your other relationships with labels in the scene, how is Understated's a little bit more special? A little
Oh,
bit.
it's
A little bit.
it's I mean, there's really no comparison. I don't have this type of relationship with anyone at other labels. It's very business-like when I'm dealing with other labels. And though we can have light, fun banter here and there and be jokey, it's not like the deep connections that I have with the Understated kids. There's been countless nights that we've stayed up together, just talking about life, joking, getting through, like relationship stuff. It's truly like a family, is what it is.
So I just wanted to talk about your last two releases over the last year and a half or so. You released on Somatic Records and also Progression Records, which I loved. Would you be able to describe how those two releases are an accurate representation of the sound that you've built over the last few years and what they mean to you?
Yeah. So the somatic release was sort of it was sort of a culmination of the sound that I had been building. It was more on the melodic techno realm, a little bit slower, but definitely kind of huge, impactful. The whole entire concept of that EP, which was called Children of the Matrix, um, that was essentially a concept that I came up with where, it was sort of questioning reality. Are we children of the Matrix? And the Progression EP sort of was a hint of where my sound would evolve to,
Mm.
because it was a little bit more melodic. It had vocals in it. It was a little bit lighter than the Somatic EP in terms of listening quality. It wasn't as, dance club focused, hard hitting. So the Somatic EP was sort of the culmination of where my sound had come, and the Progression EP is sort of a tease of where my sound was about to go.
After these two releases, where would you say you're going from here? Any way you can hint a bit before things come out?
Yeah, so I have an EP coming out on Desert Hearts Black
Amazing.
um,
Mm.
this month, and it's a pretty hard hitting EP called Virtual Faith, and that also has to do with the idea of sort of like, what does the future hold for us the deeper we get with AI and whatnot. I watched this show on HBO Max called Raised by Wolves, and it has
Yeah.
to do with AI raising a group of human babies on a different planet because Earth became inhabitable. So I thought to myself, what if we get to a point where AI becomes all knowing and all seeing, as to where we have these AI overlords? And that's why I called it Virtual Faith. And I sort of just it's a 3-track EP that's sort of a journey through what I envision Virtual Faith would be. So the first track is called Salvation's Flight. The next track is called Nature's Course, and the third track is the title track called Virtual Faith. So that's essentially going to be one of the last sort of intense, harder hitting, more techno leaning EPs that I have coming out, because the stuff that I've been focused on more is a more mature, emotional, melodic, house driven sound. I feel like naturally I gravitate towards a harder hitting style of music anyways, but the pandemic, with so much fear and so much uncertainty in everybody's lives, I realized that I didn't want to contribute to people's anxieties and stuff at that time. So I started experimenting with my sound, and I started becoming more open to the idea of working with vocalists and whatnot. And it was something that I hadn't really done in the past outside of that progression release that you mentioned earlier. That's sort of how it all began. And then in producing more hopeful, emotional, melodic music, it took me back to when I first started raving. And I realized that all of the tracks that I gravitated towards in the very beginning, they were all these hopeful, anthemic, uplifting the vocal style of music. And I just remember how it made me feel being on a dance floor, when those vocals hit, when those harmonies hit, when you hear that singer's voice, it was just like a weight was released off of your shoulders.
You just gave me chills. Like just
Yeah.
talking about that. Yeah.
So I remember being in that setting and I was like, that's how I want to move people right now. And in experimenting with that type of sound, I wasn't even sure if I would be good at it. I had no idea. But in experimenting with that kind of sound, I realized that I'm making some of the best music that I've ever made in my entire life. And I had no idea that I could do this on this level. I thought my stuff was really good earlier. The stuff that people haven't heard yet, I think is pretty incredible. And I think it'll resonate with a much, much larger fan base, because it has, the stories that the vocalists are talking about in the tracks that we've collabed with together, I feel like a lot of people will resonate with.
I love how it just seems like a lot of things come full circle for you. Like you mentioned the first Insomniac rave and like coming back in with the Discovery project. And now your first experiences also at Insomniac, but with just raves and events in general. And that type of music, it's really cool to see how that's influenced everything that's happening now. Even if that's like 10 years apart, right? Over 10 years. So
Yeah,
amazing.
I didn't even think about that, but you're absolutely right about that.
Yeah, it's really incredible to see. So I'm sure that I can speak for the Understated team right now when I say that you are a really important and integral part of not just our artist roster, but also the family that we have within the label and within the events team. You will be headlining the first two events that we have coming back into 2021. That's really important to us because you've been there with us since the beginning, and we've also played a part in your beginning. But why is coming back into the rest of this year with us important to you?
So I basically started my whole entire career with Understated. Andrew helped kick off what was to be the beginning of a lot of releases for me. And I feel like the pandemic came in and sort of took everything away, and we had this, reset. So what better way to come back and have my first show in Los Angeles than to be with Understated and headlining one of their events? The crew that really put me on in the beginning, here we are starting it all over again.
Isn't that crazy? It'll be a blast though.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited.
Yeah, me too.
Thanks so much, Riccardo, for sitting here and chatting with me today. I had a really great time.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.